Chapter 61 Domain of the Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Apophis opened his eyes, he found himself floating in an endless white void. System. Congratulations. You found a unique secret. Gain 1 level. Please note that you are not high enough level for this area and will be expelled in 5 minutes. Level 13 achieved. Apophis had no idea where exactly he had ended up, so he opened his political menu. Stellar Year. 7099 Galactic Sector. Stellar Faction. Planet. Continent. God Valley City. Domain of the Gods. The Domain of the Gods. This place had been legendary in Apophis's former life. Back then, only 7 people had ever accessed it in the nearly 10 years the game had been out. It was a place reserved for the gods, and, therefore, for any player or NPC who had achieved rank S. It was the place where all the gods met, no matter their alignment, and even if some of them were enemies. This place was a neutral zone, the only area in the entire game where all the power of the gods was blocked, preventing them from fighting with one another. According to lore which had been discovered over the years, the main objective of this place was to allow for the settlement of conflicts between gods. In very rare cases, it was rumored to allow multiple gods to arrange a way to pool their forces and contain a god too powerful or too belligerent for an individual to handle on their own. Aside from these legendary summits, the domain of the gods was said to remain completely empty. Yet, Apophis now saw, a few hundred meters in front of him, a man he'd seen before in a nightmarish experience. Unknown God, Emperor, God, Slayer, Lord of the Universe, Player, LVL. Tier. How is that possible? Apophis gasped. The probability of meeting the same God twice in such a short time, considering the absolute vastness of the universe, was 0. Moreover, Apophis suddenly realized how strange it was that this character was listed as a player, and yet was completely unknown to him. And this time, Apophis knew that there was no way out. No goddess would appear to save him. What do you want from me? He snapped. I know this isn't a coincidence. Tell me who you are and what you want from me. The god Emperor smiled. You know who I am. Slowly, the god Emperor raised his helmet and one more bit of character information popped into view. God Emperor Apophis, God Slayer, Lord of the Universe, Player, LVL. Tier. What? How is this possible? Apophis muttered. He didn't know what to think. The god Emperor answered, once divinity is achieved, few things are impossible. But I am not here to test you like last time. No, I am here to warn you. I am afraid the exact timing is unknown to me, but, at least 8 years and several months from now, at some time following the date of your first death, a cataclysm of cosmic proportions will occur. It will be known as the Great Devourer, and will seek to corrupt the gods, one after the other. Through this, the Great Devourer will threaten all life in the universe. Unfortunately, despite my current power, it is impossible for me to stop it. So it is up to you. You must find the artifact called the Ancient Heart and destroy it before the Great Devourer awakens. Apophis was in shock. Was the god Emperor really himself? Was this god a version of him from the future, or perhaps even the past? Things were getting more and more complex. Then he had an idea. Enklabasa, what do you think? The soul answered, I am as skeptical as you, master. I have known many gods, and almost all are untrustworthy. It is perhaps possible that this is a ruse by a god to get their hands on an object in the mortal universe which they may not take themselves. So Apophis spoke up and answered the god Emperor. This is all pretty hard to believe. The god Emperor replied, I know that for a mortal, this must seem truly extraordinary. The inescapable truth is that, until you reach divinity, you will be incapable of fully believing me. That is irrelevant. This is my last possible intervention with you, and there is nothing more to be said. The god Emperor placed a ring on the ground, which was otherwise impossible to tell from the rest of the surrounding white void, and said, "I offer you a second chance." Then he disappeared without a trace. Apophis retrieved the ring and inspected it. Ring of the God, Emperor Apophis, common, item summary. Ring of the God Apophis. Grants no mechanical bonus. Apophis was astonished. Why the hell did the God, Emperor leave him a worthless ring? But what intrigued Apophis the most was the God's last sentence. It was exactly what Cortana had told him just before his first death. This reinforced the God. Emperor's mystery, but gave Apophis some confidence in what the God had said. System. You are not high enough level for this area and will now be expelled. Apophis reappeared next to his mysterious cube in the void of space. Chapter 62 Commonwealth of Lizard Man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Apophis was waiting for a good hour in the vacuum of space, MK.1 finally arrived and took Apophis out of the ship. Everyone was quite curious to know what was going on inside the cube, but Apophis simply said that he had been transported to a place called the Realm of the Gods, and described the place, which surprised many. Moreover, Chocolate, who was a real little writer, and who had fun enriching the wiki of the game in order to help the other players, and what Apophis just told was exceptional for her. It was time to head for Asur, but first he had to pass through the border post of the Lizard Men Commonwealth and register the ship and passengers. Violating the sovereignty of a state was a bad idea at this stage of the game. The Apophis team arrived at the border station orbiting an asteroid in a white dwarf system. MK.1 landed inside. The team disembarked and headed for the Gueshare, but as they lined up to check in, Apophis took the opportunity to monitor the political situation, and the news was considerably worse. The Federation and the Orc Empire were on the verge of war because of the Era massacre. The Lizardman Commonwealth was an ally of the Federation, hating humans but considering the Orc Empire a threat to galactic stability. They supported the humans in this political war. As Apophis checked in, he noticed something strange. Many of the players at the border stations were Hyrule Super Guild players. While it's true that some players love to explore, it was inconceivable that so many players from the same guild would be in the same place without a good reason, but the problem was that it was too early for even a super guild to mount an expedition outside the Federation's borders. But after a thorough inspection of the border post, he saw 3 corvettes with the Hyrule Guild logo in the hangar. This means that about 30 elite players were in pursuit. It was clear now. The members of this guild wanted to either capture them or eliminate them for what they had done to Zelda, the star player of the guild. Unfortunately, Apophis could not eliminate them here in a border post, otherwise he would be pursued by the Commonwealth. Nevertheless, he did not want to lose the initiative, and fortunately the border post was equipped with fuel pumps for the ships, and Apophis's Zetark Corvette was a powerful ship and its sublight engine was one of the most advanced in the galaxy, so it could use the fuel from the capital ships and thus increase its speed by 300%. The recordings being finished now, Apophis and his team went back in MK.1. Nevertheless, before leaving in subliminic speed, Apophis passed to the gasoline pump and thus mixed the fuel of light ships with and that of capital ships, and passed in maximum subliminic speed, direction the planet Asur. Occasionally missing content, please report errors in time. Chapter 63, 1, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Finally, the MK.1 arrived on Asur, a desert planet. Since the lizardmen were well adapted to this climate, the planet was probably highly populated. According to Apophis's memory, the dungeon portal would have appeared quite close to a small village called Chgiz. Fortunately, the in-game political menu was a real help in finding it. The MK.1 set down outside the village. Before they disembarked, Apophis gave a mission to Antanria and Colonel Ralphit. They'd had to stay behind, since any NPC who tried to pass through a dungeon portal died instantly. After this, the 5 players of the Eclipse Guild exited the MK.1 and headed for the dungeon. Once they arrived, seeing the portal looming ahead, Apophis said, "Look, I know we've already done a dungeon in Nightmare mode, but Iron Man mode is very different. Not only are the enemies more difficult, but every aspect of the dungeon has the possibility to change. Moreover, if you fail, your character is permanently deleted. This next part is very important, so pay attention. Iron Man dungeons will put you under intense psychological pressure, so you must do everything you can to not be overwhelmed. If you remember Gravedigger's Tower, it tried to create a severe atmosphere to match the horror theme, but this will be much worse. Unfortunately, I don't know what's inside. All our system information stops above hard difficulty, so be prepared for any eventuality. Oh yes, make sure to transfer your GCs to your forum account so you won't lose them if we fail. Good luck to all. Despite his power, Apophis felt nervous. After all, this was his first time in Iron Man mode, and only one team in his former life had successfully completed a dungeon on such a difficulty. And many people had certainly tried. But despite the passion that arose around such lucrative dungeons, Lucifer, of the Super Guild, Lord of War, the only party leader to beat one on Iron Man. And he'd never disclosed any meaningful information about his experience. The only thing anyone knew was that he'd beaten a LVL 150 dungeon called Bad Dream. But Apophis was extremely prepared for this dungeon. He'd previously bought hundreds of health and energy potions, which he now distributed to the team. There were also many stat-boosting potions. Altogether, their party was probably one of the best in the game in terms of power and skill. Unfortunately, their morale wasn't as high as Apophis wished. After all, it had been almost a month since he'd actually had to exert himself in the game, and he wondered if that would hold him back now. In addition, the possibility of permanently losing their characters clearly made everyone uneasy. But there would be no more delays. It was time to go. Apophis set the dungeon difficulty to Iron Man, and the green portal turned red. However, this wasn't the only effect. A woman's piercing scream cut through the air, but as the team looked around, they couldn't find the source. All they saw was the vast desert and the nearby village and MK.1. At last, the team entered the dungeon. System. You've entered the dungeon LVL 1020, Messiah's Path, on Iron Man difficulty. Character death within this dungeon is permanent. The portal flickered twice, then vanished. There was no going back. The dungeon's atmosphere was very close to that of a horror movie. Apophis quickly realized they were in the same desert that they had just been standing on, though surrounded by extremely thick fog that gave the sensation that one was being watched. This immediately put the group on edge. The effect grew worse as everyone realized they had no clear destination. After all, there was no horizon or landmark in sight, only the strange mist. Lotus, being a mechanic, offered to craft beacon devices and leave them in a trail behind the party, so that they could retrace their steps later. She quickly began crafting, and then the party formed a marching order. Hulk was at the front, then Apophis, and then Chocolate after him. In the back were White and then Lotus, leaving her trail of beacons. The group walked for a good hour before finally coming across a huge wall 10 meters high. There was no way for them to cross it, so the group decided to walk along it for a distance. However, it was another hour before they found what looked like an entrance in the wall. Hulk led the way, his defenses carefully raised, and the party trailed cautiously behind him. Strange, long walls rose on either side of them, and the path eventually diverged into two directions as another portion of wall appeared in front of them. "I see," said Apophis. "It's a labyrinth." Chapter 64, 2, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The team quickly realized that Apophis was right. They were in a labyrinth. Lotus started making a map while everyone else debated the best strategy to adopt. Suddenly, they were attacked by a group of 10 monsters. Naga, Elite, Level 20, Rank D+, Hostile. The team sprang into formation. Hulk moved to the front, preparing to tank, while the others arranged themselves for attacking. Unfortunately, unlike when Apophis had entered the Gravedigger's Tower, his current party lacked balance. Hulk was their only melee fighter, while everyone else specialized in ranged combat. White and Lotus both had combat pets to help in melee, but it just wasn't the same as having more melee players. Their fight was brutal. The Nagas were extremely aggressive creatures and didn't give up easily, but the party took them down one by one under Apophis's direction. Level 14 achieved in the end, it was no surprise that a team full of elite players and equipped with epic items was victorious against even Ironman Nagas. After their victory, the group continued walking, having eventually decided on a path. Soon, however, they encountered more monsters. And then more, and even more. The party fought hard over the next hour, and everyone grew gradually exhausted. Nagas were coming at them from all sides. Some even leaped down from above, like meteors from the misty sky. The situation became unbearable. Apophis realized the team had no time to rest with how often the enemies were attacking. This seemed like a good time to use his cosmic materialization skill. This skill allowed him to materialize any object he wanted, so long as he had enough energy. He quickly materialized huge rocks, which appeared between the players and some of the monsters. The party took deep, relieved breaths. The rocks hadn't blocked out all the monsters, but at least allowed the party to fight forward without being attacked on all sides for a few minutes. Though this was an enormous help, they had another problem. The players were sustaining constant damage from the vicious Nagas, and, though she was very skilled, Chocolate simply didn't have enough energy to keep up. She constantly had to drink energy potions to refill her reserves, and every moment she was drinking a potion was a moment she wasn't healing her allies. However, despite the insane difficulty of the battle, Apophis's party finally eliminated the waves of monsters that had seemed endless only moments before. The most intense part of the fight, when the Nagas had come without cease, had lasted well over 20 minutes and had resulted in over 100 dead Nagas. The monster corpses piled on top of one another as the reinforcements crawled over the corpses of their fellow Nagas in order to attack, and they had ultimately made a hill 5 meters high. Fortunately, the fight was worthwhile. The team had gained so much experience that almost everyone had hit LVL 15. Lotus was the only exception, and even she had reached LVL 14. They took a quick break, allowing everyone a chance to breathe a little. Apophis sat down and used the break to spend his 25 skill points that he'd accumulated since LVL 10. Before he did so, Apophis opened his character menu and inspected his stats. Name: Apophis.Soul. Enclabasa, Guild. Eclipse, Leader, Race. Zetark, Human Hybrid, Evolution LVL. 2, Next Evolution. LVL 20, Gender. Male Class. Esper LVL, 15 Rank. See Alignment Point 100, Very Dark, Stats. STR, Strength. 200, plus 10%, x2 equals 440 INT, Intelligence. 200, plus 10%, x2 equals 440 AGI, Agility. 200, plus 10%, x2 equals 440 DX, Dexterity. 200, plus 10%, x2 equals 440 Energy. 1500, plus 50%, x2 equals 4500 Luck. 1 times 2 is equal to 2. Global Skill. Book Skills. Berserk, Cosmic Materialization, Dark Cosmic Meditation, LVL 2, Demon God Flame, LVL 2, Lord of Flames, Susanoo, Zoanthropy Talent Tree Skills. Energy Regeneration. 15 PTS, Firebending. 50 PTS, Telekinesis. 10 PTS Passive Skills. Archaeologist, Esper, Warrior, Genocidal, Inventory. Equipment. Zetark Nobility Uniform, Epic, God Sencha's Rings of Power, Legendary, Complete Zetark Battle Armor, Rare, Ring of the God, Emperor Apophis, Common, Money. 13,000 galactic coins. Most players at this level would be around rank D or D+, and would only achieve rank C once they achieved the third stage of character evolution. Of course, Apophis wasn't like most players. The power rank was a descriptor of a character's overall effectiveness, regardless of level. It was no surprise that Apophis was so ahead of the curve, considering all his skill books and equipment. Apophis looked through his talent tree for a while and finally made his decision. He spent 25 skill points in a new branch of the tree. Hydrokinesis, the mastery of water. He put those points into waterbending, a skill to match firebending, notification. Congratulations, your firebending and waterbending skills have unlocked a skill synthesis. You can now combine both elements without receiving any damage penalty. Apophis has just created liquid fire. Chapter 65, 3, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next 2 hours were brutal. After resting, Apophis's party went right back to warring against the Nagas. These monsters were as skillful and cohesive as a professional army, and made every step forward a hard-won victory. Moreover, the labyrinth walls were identical, which disoriented the party and filled them with a stagnating fatigue. At least the combat awarded plenty of EXP. By the end of that 2-hour stretch, everyone had reached LVL 17. And, thankfully, the beacons which Lotus created using her engineer class assured them they were going in the right direction. Finally, after exterminating a group of 20 Nagas, the group finally saw a change in their surroundings as they entered a huge enclosure, the floor of which must have been an entire square kilometer in area. Everyone's first instinct was that they'd come across the boss chamber, but even the thought of that was a kind of relief from the insane stress of the labyrinth corridors. At the far end of this enormous enclave was a huge door, guarded by a red Naga 4 times the size of the regular monsters they'd been fighting. Naga Queen, Boss, Level 25, Rank C+, Hostile. The boss wasn't alone, but was surrounded by more than 100 Naga. At this sight, the party was shocked and demoralized. How could they face 100 Naga at the same time? Let alone the boss, whose abilities were completely unknown. Surely this was beyond the team's capabilities. Hulk spoke up. There's no way I can hold back so many monsters at once. Besides, I'd bet this isn't all of them. Reinforcements will definitely jump out from behind us once the fighting starts. If our previous battles have made anything clear, it's that the Naga's key strategy is to overwhelm us with sheer numbers. Everybody began debating the best strategy. It was hard for anyone else to admit that the boss would be impossible for them in their current state, but several people wanted to return to the labyrinth and grind at least a few more levels. However, Apophis stopped them. Look, I have a plan. He used his materialization skill and built a wooden staircase that rose to the top of the labyrinth walls, which also composed the boss's enclosure. The team was shocked. They'd seen him summon rocks before to protect them, but that could have been a very basic skill. Apophis could just summon whatever he wanted. What kind of broken skill was that? Apophis ignored their surprise. He took the initiative and led the team up the staircase. The walls rose 10 meters high. At the top, Apophis could have potentially seen the whole labyrinth, if not for the heavy fog. But he hadn't climbed the walls to get a good view. No, Apophis had realized that climbing the wall would put them out of melee range from most of the Nagas. It might not protect them from the towering boss, but it was certainly an immense advantage. With careful steps, the team moved forward and engaged the boss from the wall. Before they attacked, Apophis soaked the wooden stairs with water, then threw his first ball of fire at the boss. The Naga Queen looked lost. It proved to be impossible for even her to fight back against Apophis and his party, let alone the normal Nagas, which were much smaller. It was a one-way fight. They quickly and easily eliminated the hundreds of Nagas who arrived to defend their queen, then attacked the queen herself. Some Nagas noticed Apophis's staircase and rushed up it, but he had been waiting for this. Once a swarm of about 10 Nagas had filled up the staircase and almost reached the top, Apophis snapped his fingers. Apophis waited for the right moment. When 10 Naga were present at the same time on the staircase, Apophis snapped his fingers. The water-covered staircase burst into black flames. The damage was incredible. Nagas screamed as they burned alive, consumed by the synergized fire and water Apophis had recently learned. The wooden stairs quickly collapsed into embers, hurling the remaining monsters to their deaths below. Finally, the regular Nagas were dead, and the team focused their firepower on the Naga Queen. However, just when the Queen's HP was almost gone, Apophis had a sudden idea. Hold on. Stop attacking. Listen, I just realized there's a potential EXP farm here. Every 2 minutes, about 20 Nagas appear as reinforcements. Since there's no way they can hurt us here, why not just sit here and slaughter them as they show up? We should be able to hit LVL 20 easily. The group exploited this mechanic for 5 hours. It was tedious, but eventually paid off when they reached LVL 22. Even Lotus, who had entered the dungeons 1 level behind everyone else, caught up because of the sheer amount of EXP required as the levels rose. However, once they hit LVL 22, the amount of EXP needed for the next level skyrocketed, and the Nagas no longer provided enough EXP for the farm to be worth it. Apophis finally ordered them to finish off the boss. After 10 minutes, the boss simply died to the party's ranged attacks, unable to even defend itself. Now it was time to gather loot and reach the next stage of evolution. Chapter 66, 4, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone was filled with joy as the boss died. They'd finished at least the first phase of the dungeon, even if it had taken them over 12 hours. After all this time of constant fighting against organized and vicious Nagas, everyone was exhausted. When Apophis created a new staircase and descended to collect the Naga Queen's loot, the whole team received the same item. Roulette of Fate, Consumable, Legendary, Item Summary. The Roulette of Fate turns. What was, what will be, and what now is, may yet fall under the shadow. Randomly gain 1 legendary passive skill, chosen from all available in the game. This was incredible loot. It was much better than the items that dropped, which might eventually become obsolete as better equipment was found. But passive skills were always available, so it was always good to have another. Apophis didn't waste any time and activated his Roulette of Fate immediately. A sub-menu appeared before him, displaying a huge roulette wheel broken into thousands of tiny subdivisions, each containing a legendary passive skill. He spun the cursor, and it sped from one skill to another. Soon, it slowed, and after 30 seconds, settled on its choice. Ghost, passive skill, legendary, skill summary. Banish your body for a time, leaving only your spirit behind. Enter a ghostly state, during which you can pass through physical objects and ignore physical attacks. Apophis almost fainted with astonishment. What an absolutely incredible skill. It had no maximum duration and didn't even consume energy. If this was only the loot from the first boss, what more lay in store for them at the end of the dungeon? Iron Man difficulty rewards truly were incredible. Everyone was happy at last as they saw the proof of how their hard work and intense stress had paid off. Nevertheless, they still had the rest of the dungeon in front of them, and that would surely not be easy. Considering how long they'd been fighting through the dungeon, the party agreed to take a break and get some sleep. It was the perfect opportunity to take a break, actually. Having reached LVL 20 earlier, each party member had unlocked their next character evolution. This would provide a huge power boost and make the rest of the dungeon easier, of course, but would take many hours of time to complete. Everyone climbed the wooden stairs and returned to the wall, just in case more Nagas attacked while they were resting. Before deciding on his own evolution, Apophis spent 50 skill points to evolve his Demon God Flame, LVL 2, Eternal Flame, LVL 3, Skill Summary. The Demon God's flames incarnated into their eternal form. Divinely beautiful, but apocalyptically deadly. Your flame-based skills consume no energy. Deal more fire damage of a percentage equal to 0.10 times your alignment. Flames you create cannot be extinguished except by you. This skill can be upgraded for 100 talent points. This was incredible, but also terrifying. Apophis looked at that second effect in the description, which gave him a new damage bonus. He realized that, since it gave a negative multiplier, that meant that he would receive a damage penalty for having a positive alignment, but a damage bonus for having a negative one. In his current state, at 0.100 alignment, Eternal Flame gave him a 1000% damage bonus to his fire skills, rather than the 500% damage bonus the skill's previous stage had granted. But if he returned to neutral and then gained 10 positive alignment, putting him only slightly in good, that would still be enough to give him a 100% penalty to all his fire damage, reducing it to nothing. This would force Apophis to stay evil-aligned if he wanted to keep his power. He suspected that the influence of his, God Sencha's rings of power, was behind the fact that he'd ended up with this skill. Well, time for something more pleasant to think about. Now to evolve his character race. Calculating your evolutionary potential, please select from the available evolutionary paths. Demonic Human, Legendary, Tier 3. The God Sench granted hearts of eternal fire to his most loyal disciples, giving them unimaginable power in exchange for their humanity. Pure Blood Zetark, Epic, Tier 3. It is whispered throughout the galaxy that the greatest empire ever to exist may one day rise again. Could this be their time? Both were excellent choices, depending on what one considered valuable. Demonic Humans had much higher base stats than even Pure Blood Zetark, but forced the player who chose that path to have a negative alignment and constantly to make chaotic and evil choices. It completely corrupted the player's free will, filling the player with raw emotion and egotism. Since he didn't want to lose his sanity and free will, Apophis easily chose Pure Blood Zetark as his next evolution. Even if he needed to keep his alignment evil to keep his damage bonus, there was no need to go completely insane. Evolution will complete in 5 hours. With nothing else to do, Apophis told everyone to meet back up in 5 hours, then disconnected. Chapter 67, 5, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a 2. Short night of sleep, Apophis reconnected. System. Welcome to the galaxy of Horus. Your character evolution has completed. Apophis was the first to return to the game. He took the opportunity to inspect his character menu. Name: Apophis, Soul. Enclabasa, Guild. Eclipse, Leader, Race. Zetark, Pure Blood, Evolution LVL. 3, Next Evolution. LVL 50, Sex. Male Class. Esper LVL, 22 Rank. C+ Alignment. 188, Very Dark. Stats. STR, Strength. 350, plus 10%, x2 equals 770 INT, Intelligence. 350, plus 10%, x2 equals 770 AGI, Agility. 350, plus 10%, x2 equals 770 DX, Dexterity. 350, plus 10%, x2 equals 770 Energy. 3000, plus 50%, x2 equals 9000 Luck. 1 times 2 is equal to 2. Global Skill. Book Skills. Berserk, Cosmic Materialization, Dark Cosmic Meditation, LVL2, Eternal Flame, LVL3, Lord of Flames, Susanu, Zoanthropy. Talent Tree Skills. Energy Regeneration. 15 PTS, Firebending. 50 PTS, Telekinesis. 10 PTS, Waterbending. 25 PTS. Passive Skills. Archaeologist, Ghost, Genocidal, Esper, Warrior. Inventory. Equipment. Zetark Nobility Uniform, Epic, God Sencha's Rings of Power, Legendary, Complete Zetark Battle Armor, Rare, Ring of the God, Emperor Apophis, Common, Money. 13,000 Galactic Coin Summary. Your power grows day by day. You'll one day be the perfect fighter, but with every step, your soul darkens further. You're on the perfect path to become an evil god. These were truly exceptional stats for a character at LVL 22. At this point, Apophis was, without a doubt, the most powerful player in the game. Nevertheless, he had to continue his momentum if he wanted to keep his lead. That would be extremely complicated now that the super guilds had access to the infinite resources of outer space. They would focus on cultivating and strengthening their elite players to the detriment of ordinary members, who were just there to be exploited. It was a terrible arrangement for the regular members of these guilds, but, since they got paid for their efforts, they just accepted the situation while dreaming of becoming elite players themselves one day. As Apophis was lost in thought, Lotus reconnected. Apophis rushed towards her and kissed her savagely. To avoid drama, they'd hidden their relationship from the rest of the Eclipse Guild, and so it had been almost 5 days since the two had exchanged a tender moment. Lotus seemed happy with this moment of tenderness, but after this exchange of kisses and hugs, she said, "Apophis, I have to tell you something that's going to be hard to hear." She hesitated for a moment. "I wish to leave the guild after this dungeon. I only joined because you asked me to help you start it, but the playstyle is simply not for me. If anything, I want to start my own guild someday. I promise that I'm not resentful towards you in any way. Only, I don't want to depend on anyone." Apophis was disappointed, but not surprised. Lotus had been extremely independent in his original life, after all. "I understand perfectly," he said. "Thank you for telling me. Actually, I have an idea that might satisfy us both. Take over from me as guild leader of Eclipse. I never really wanted to found a guild, and I'm not interested in the day-to-day business management stuff. I only started it because the benefits of a guild are so great." "Well, what do you say?" Lotus was astonished. "I'll think about it, I promise." The two lovers spent a few minutes flirting, but then Hulk returned to the game, abruptly forcing them to separate. Before long, everyone had returned, and Apophis addressed them all. "Look, I know we've all had very little sleep, but we need to stay focused on completing the dungeon. Remember, death here means you lose your character forever. But also remember that we've been able to outsmart the dungeon once so far. If we stay alert and use all our resources to their full potential, I know we can succeed." The group descended the wooden stairs to the ground level and made their way to the gigantic door which the Naga Queen had guarded. The door was too huge to open through ordinary strength, but Apophis summoned his Susanoo and then could shove it open. Behind the door was a vast graveyard that stretched as far as the eye could see. Of course, with all the fog, that wasn't exactly a great distance. In fact, once the party moved through the door, everyone noticed at once that the fog seemed even heavier than before. The atmosphere was terribly oppressive. The group resumed their marching formation with Hulk at the front, then advanced through the graveyard. As they walked, monumental figures became visible. They were the famous specters, which appeared in every dungeon of nightmare difficulty and higher, the faceless, shadowed, motionless figures who observed those who intruded in these pockets of reality. These ones stood by the side of the road, and Apophis realized that he'd never seen them so close. Nevertheless, they were not in the least aggressive, and let the party pass in wary peace. As the group remained vigilant, a woman's voice called out not far down the road. That cry had haunted them all throughout the dungeon, but never so loud, and never so close. The party readied themselves, preparing for a fight. Yet, as they moved slowly forward, the group came upon not a wailing woman but a deep ravine. A suspension bridge stretched across it. Guarded by a grim reaper wielding a sinister scythe. Guardian of Truth, Boss, Level 200, Tier S, Peaceful, this was the second boss. But then why was it marked as peaceful? Since Hulk was the tank, he cautiously stepped in front of the boss. Getting no immediate reaction, Hulk tried to step onto the suspension bridge. The Guardian of Truth tilted his scythe in one graceful gesture, laying it across Hulk's neck. Hulk froze as the boss spoke in a gravelly voice. Only those who have been chosen by the Prophet of Truth can pass. Hulk responded hesitantly, what must I do to be chosen? You must answer a question. Relieved, Hulk said, I'm listening. The boss's voice grew louder and more thunderous as it asked, what are the teachings of the Prophet? The Hulk thought for about 10 seconds, then said, you must always tell the truth. The boss barely moved, but only tilted its arm, pulling all the weight of its massive scythe across Hulk's throat. The boxer toppled to the ground, his head rolling silently into the chasm before him. System. Party member, Hulk, has died. Player, Hulk, has left your guild, Eclipse. Player, Hulk, has left your friend list. Everyone stared in shock at the decapitated corpse on the ground. Hulk had died in a mere moment, and his character had been permanently deleted because they were in an Iron Man dungeon. How could they possibly win now? Who ever heard of a bunch of ranged players beating a dungeon without a tank? Everyone still alive was thinking the same thing. There's no way we can beat this boss. It was a real dead end. Chapter 68, 6, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone was horrified. Hulk didn't even have the chance to defend himself, but had died in an instant. The group would have to change their strategy if they wanted to pass this boss. Everyone began debating the best way to solve the problem, but nobody could agree with one another. But after 10 minutes of debating, Lotus called for everyone to be quiet. Everybody, do you hear that? The strange, heavy sound of giant paws thumping came from far behind them, in the direction they had just come. Lotus looked pale. Something is destroying my beacons, and it's getting closer, Apophis replied, we don't have time to debate anymore. I'll tank this monster with my Susanoo. Chocolate, get ready to heal me. Everyone else, prepare to fight. But even as Apophis spoke, a pure black shadow 15 meters high loomed in the fog. Suddenly, the idea of fighting this creature seemed absurd. What were they supposed to do? They had an unbeatable enemy in front of them and another one behind. Apophis nodded, making his voice ring with authority. Okay, we have no choice but to cross the bridge. If not, we're dead. Chocolate said, I'll see if the Guardian's next question is any easier. She approached the boss. I await your question, Guardian. The boss answered, what is the name of the Prophet? Chocolate, confused, made a wild guess. Jesus. With the hiss of his blade, the boss lopped off Chocolate's head. System. Party member, Chocolate, has died. Player, Chocolate, has left your guild, Eclipse. Player, Chocolate, has left your friend list. Now, only Apophis, Lotus, and White remained. Was there any possibility that they'd succeed where their allies had failed? White said, well, thank you for what you've done for us, Apophis. I won't forget it, and I hope we'll meet up again after making new characters. Then White did the same as Chocolate, approaching the boss and saying, I await your question, Guardian. The boss answered, when was the Prophet of Truth born? Rather than answering, White drew her plasma rifle and shot the Guardian in the forehead. She inflicted no damage, and a moment later. System. Party member, White, has died. Player, White, has left your guild, Eclipse. Player, White, has left your friend list. Behind them, the shadow of the giant pierced the fog, it was a stone colossus. The Great Cleaner, level. Rank. Hostile, Lotus said, before we are separated, I would like to know your name. Apophis answered, Alexander. And you? Emma. Apophis, with tears in his eyes, said, I'm so sorry I got you into this. I should have shown a little more humility. Now, because of me, we're going to lose everything. Lotus replied, don't worry, you're not responsible. We all accepted the risk of doing the dungeon in Iron Man mode. The choice was ours, and we have accepted the consequences. She embraced Apophis one last time, then stepped in front of the guardian. What is the name of the holy book written by the prophet? It asked in its hissing voice. Lotus did not bother answering, but only turned to Apophis and gave him a farewell smile. The guardian punished her failure to answer. System. Party member, Lotus, has died. Player, Lotus, has left your guild, Eclipse. Player, Lotus, has left your friend list. The stone colossus was now only about 100 meters behind Apophis. He must advance or die. So he summoned his courage and stepped forward. I'll hear your question, Guardian. It answered, do you have faith in the prophet of truth? Apophis was surprised at the simplicity of the question. The first word that came to his mind was obviously, yes, but this seemed like an obvious trap. Apophis asked his soul, do you have an opinion on the matter, Enklabasa? It whispered back to him, no, my lord. I am sorry. Apophis thought back across the whole dungeon and the questions each team member had been given. One thing quickly became clear. The dungeon was intended for players between levels 10 and 20, ones who had just unlocked space travel and would have no idea what any of the lore of Horus was. But then, even Apophis, with his many years of experience in the game, didn't know what these questions meant. Surely the answers were supposed to be philosophical, rather than mere trivia. Apophis summoned all his courage and said, I think the idea of truth doesn't exist. The guardian barely reacted. This is incorrect. But Apophis was convinced that this was the right way to approach the question, and kept speaking. I'll say it again. There's no such thing as truth, only facts and interpretations. Your God and your prophet do not exist. There was a long moment of silence. Then the guardian of truth vanished, leaving the bridge unguarded. Chapter 69, 7, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Apophis collapsed on the ground at the far side of the bridge. He'd done it. He'd defeated the boss and crossed the bridge. But it had cost him all his team, because he'd been too confident and failed to see what was right in front of him. If he beat the dungeon alone, that would restore his friends' characters, right? That was his only chance. He had to make up for the mistakes he'd made up till now. But now he'd be alone against whatever else the dungeon had to throw against him. Surely this was too desperate for even him to succeed. Apophis burned the wooden bridge behind him so the colossus couldn't follow, then continued on his way in the fog. Unfortunately, thousands of skeletons quickly emerged from the ground. Skeleton Fighter, Elite, Level 20, Rank C. Skeleton Archer, Elite, Level 20, Rank, Tier C. Fortunately, Apophis has recently acquired the passive skill Ghost would be perfect for this. Since he didn't have any party members to account for, Apophis could simply make himself immune to purely physical attacks and pass through the horde without issue. Apophis turned into a ghost and covered his body with black flames, then charged through the thousands of skeletons. They burned helplessly as he attacked them, leaving nothing but ruined terrain behind. Apophis was really in a bad mood, and his flames now made him look like an actual demon as he covered the area with black fire to kill any form of life remaining. After 3 hours of slaughtering skeletons, Apophis reached LVL 24 and arrived at the edge of a cliff. At the very end lay an enormous building 15 meters high, resembling a Greek pantheon. Somehow, the cliff and building were completely spared from being obscured by the dungeon's fog. Finally Apophis had arrived at what was surely the home of this cursed dungeon's last boss. Apophis took a quick break to renew his energy and to drink a few HP and energy potions. Then, at last, he entered the immense pantheon. Inside was emptiness. A vast space within, and a starry sky above. Where was the boss? Apophis searched every corner of the pantheon and even stepped outside to see if there was a hidden passage to a basement, but found nothing. The place seemed totally empty. Apophis returned to the center of the pantheon and sat on the ground. He took advantage of the free time to talk with Enklabasa. Tell me, what do you know about this prophet, or this God of truth? Enklabasa answered, yes, Master. He is one of the 10 major gods of the universe, a god of light who hates evil. Nevertheless, he hasn't appeared in the universe for thousands of years. I had believed he was killed. Apophis answered, if he hates evil, then we're totally dead, right? Enklabasa answered, it is probable. Just then, a woman in a priestly robe appeared at the pantheon's entrance. A small boy held one of her hands, and she wielded a beautiful staff in the other. Prophetess of Truth, Boss, Level 100, Rank A+, Apophis sighed. This was what he had been looking for, at least. I'm in a very bad mood, he said. If you piss me off, don't expect any mercy. The prophetess let go of the child's hand and pointed her staff at Apophis. Your journey ends here, servant of evil. Apophis activated Berserk, then Susanoo, which he covered in black flame. He moved at great speed towards the prophetess, who threw up a yellow shield around her using her staff. Susanoo's punch slammed into the prophetess's shield, causing an enormous shock wave, but the boss easily stopped the attack. In response, she used her staff to unleash a huge ray of energy at Apophis. His Susanoo shattered, and half his HP drained away from the immense power of the attack. Apophis got back up, dripping with blood. Meanwhile, the boss had only lost 1% of her HP from his all-out assault. Apophis reacted quickly by activating his waterbending, covering the whole room with black water, which he then set on fire. The flames spread quickly, threatening to consume the boss's body. But she reacted immediately, raising her staff to the sky. A huge yellow lightning bolt tore into Apophis, reducing him to ashes and destroying the ground around him. But the prophetess quickly realized Apophis wasn't dead, for his black flames still covered her. In moments, they burned away her robes, leaving her naked. 10 minutes later, the black flames which still roiled through the room surged in an intense burst. A huge phoenix surged from the flames, spitting a jet of black flame at the boss, destroying her shield. But while the prophetess tried to resist the flames, Apophis threw himself on the child who had accompanied the prophetess and put a knife to his throat. Before the lightning bolt had hit him, Apophis had activated zoanthropy, allowing him to transform into a phoenix. In this state, being reduced to ashes had merely allowed him to transform into an egg and be reborn in the same black flames that could not be extinguished except through his death. Once she saw that Apophis had returned, the prophetess tried to rush towards the child, but it was too late. Apophis had a hostage, and now the advantage was his. Chapter 78, Messiah's Path. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Warning. This chapter is rated R18 for violence. A horrified look crossed the prophetess's face as she realized Apophis was holding the child hostage. She set her stick down on the ground as a sign of peace. Listen to me, Eternal. This child is the reincarnation of the God of Truth. He is pure and uncorrupted. If you kill him, forces you cannot even imagine will consider it an unforgivable crime. You will be hunted down by all the luminous gods, Eternal. Think carefully about what you are about to do. Apophis didn't say a word. Every moment, his flames did more damage that the prophetess couldn't evade. Every second he gained brought him closer to victory. Annoyed by Apophis's lack of response, the prophetess waved her hand. The corpses of Apophis's fallen teammates appeared at her feet, with their heads in another pile beside them. I can resurrect them, she said. I'll do that and then let you all leave this place if you release the child. I swear to you by the Creator of the universe. Put down your weapon and leave this dimension in peace. Apophis was astonished. This was an interesting opportunity. Even if they'd lose out on the ultimate treasure of the dungeon, everyone would get their characters back. But just as Apophis was about to agree, Enklabasa whispered, Master. If you contract with a god of light, you will lose all your dark powers and I will probably be exorcised from your body. I advise you to find another way out. Apophis responded to neither Enklabasa nor the prophetess, but released the terrified child. The moment he was free, the child scrambled toward the prophetess, who seemed relieved. Killing an innocent child, even if it was only an NPC, was just too cruel for even Apophis. But Apophis suddenly had flashbacks of his old life. He remembered the social and financial misery which had consumed him, the death of his mother, his girlfriend losing him, the years spent in slavery to his old guild. Tears flowed from Apophis's eyes at the thought of experiencing all that again. And if he let this child live, and therefore gave up all his power, he would indeed live the same pain all over again. The child finally reached the prophetess, who immediately embraced him and began comforting him. The black flames surrounding the prophetess formed into a heavy blade that sprouted from her own chest and pierced the child's. Her own embrace killed her ward in an instant. Asterisk, reincarnation of the God of Truth, killed. Gain 5,602,354 EXP and .1000 alignment. Asterisk level 25 achieved. The prophetess stared at the corpse in her arms with shocked horror while Enklabasa laughed in surprised joy. Apophis activated his phoenix form and threw a jet of black flame at the prophetess of truth. He beat the phoenix's huge wings, hurling more than 100 huge fireballs at his enemy. And thanks to the huge alignment shift he'd just received, Eternal Flame gave him a horrifyingly huge damage bonus of plus 10,000%. The prophetess was still in shock, and couldn't avoid the attack. The full force of Apophis's fire slammed into her and hurled her to the ground, causing her body to burn away under the black flames. Just before she died, Apophis saw her smile. "You've doomed yourself, Eternal. Your soul is cursed, and the gods will come to take their revenge." Boss, prophetess of the God of Truth, killed. Gain 7,568,568 EXP and .100 alignment. Level 26 achieved. Server announcement. The player, Apophis, has committed sacrilege by killing the reincarnation of the God of Truth. The title of God Slayer has been bestowed upon him. A bounty of 10 million GC plus 1,000 alignment has been placed on him. Server announcement. Congratulations to the party led by the player, Apophis, for being the first to clear the dungeon, Messiah's Path, on Ironman difficulty. A reward of 1 million GC level has been awarded to each member of the party, as well as a 50% EXP bonus, which will last until their next death. System. The players, Chocolate, Hulk, Lotus, and White have joined your guild, Eclipse. The players, Chocolate, Hulk, Lotus, and White have been added to your friend list. Apophis was almost stunned. Despite them being removed from the game when they died, they'd been restored upon him beating the dungeon. That was fantastic. The 4 other players didn't understand what had happened, as the game seemed to have put them into a kind of coma once they died, so Apophis spoke up. "I finished the dungeon. We won." Everyone burst out in celebration. Of course, Hulk was completely lost. All the others had seen him die, but from his perspective, he'd answered the question, and then been teleported here. He asked Apophis for more explanation, and everyone listened in amazement to his tale. Finally, though, it was time to check out their dungeon rewards.